The property tax notice lay open on my kitchen table, next to my coffee mug and reading glasses. When Ryan looked me straight in the eye and said, "Dad, let's be honest here. You've never achieved anything significant in your entire life. You just fix other people's computers." Something fundamental shifted inside me like a circuit breaker finding its correct position. I said nothing, but that evening I transferred my remaining $105,000 into a new account at First National Bank. They came home the next day to find the joint account frozen and a manila envelope waiting on the kitchen counter. After reading the divorce papers inside, Brenda started screaming about lawyers and custody of assets. That's when I realized this was just the opening move in a much longer game. 3 weeks earlier, our kitchen had been filled with the warm smell of Brenda's famous pot roast and the comfortable sounds of family dinner conversation. Ryan had driven down from Durham with exciting news about his latest business venture, some kind of app that would revolutionize food delivery for college students. The enthusiasm in his voice reminded me of when he was 12 and convinced he could build a rocket ship out of cardboard tubes and firecrackers. "Dad, this could be huge," he said, gesturing with his fork loaded with mashed potatoes. "We're talking about expanding to 15 campuses by next spring. Duke, UNC, NC State, Wake Forest. The market research shows incredible demand." Brenda beamed at him with the kind of maternal pride that had always made me feel lucky to be part of this family. "Tell your father about the investor meetings, honey. 3 different venture capital firms want to hear our pitch next month. But here's the thing," Ryan leaned forward, his eyes bright with possibility. "We need to show some serious capital commitment first. Skin in the game, you know? It demonstrates confidence to potential investors." I set down my water glass, already knowing where this conversation was headed. "How much skin are we talking about?" $75,000. I know it sounds like a lot, but Dad, think about it. You've been so careful with money all these years, building that retirement fund. This could multiply it by 10, maybe 20 times. We're talking about generational wealth here. The kitchen felt warm and safe, filled with the kind of hope that makes risky decisions seem reasonable. Brenda reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "George, you've worked so hard for so long. Maybe it's time to think bigger. Take a real chance for once." "I've been thinking the same thing," I admitted. "Maybe I have been too conservative. Your mother's always saying I play things too safe." Ryan's face lit up. "Exactly. And here's the beautiful part, Dad. Even if the worst happened, which it won't, but even if it did, you'd still have over 100,000 left. You're not risking your entire future, just giving it a chance to grow." I looked around our kitchen, at the family photos covering the refrigerator, at Brenda's collection of ceramic roosters on the windowsill, at Ryan's old high school wrestling trophies still displayed on the shelf above the sink. This was what I'd worked for, wasn't it? To be able to help my family reach for something bigger? "Let me think about it over the weekend," I said finally. "Monday morning, I'll give you an answer." Brenda squeezed my hand tighter. That's my practical husband, always sleeping on the big decisions. We spent the rest of dinner talking about Ryan's girlfriend Jennifer, about Brenda's book club, about my plans to finally fix the back deck. Normal family conversation filled with the comfortable assumption that we were all on the same side, working toward the same future. When Ryan helped me clear the dishes, he put his arm around my shoulders. "Thanks for even considering it, Dad. I know it's a big ask, but I really think this could change everything for all of us." That was a Thursday evening in September. By the following Tuesday, I had approved the transfer from our joint savings account to Ryan's business account. $75,000. 15 years of careful saving, gone with a few keystrokes on my laptop. The betrayal revealed itself 6 months later on a Tuesday afternoon in March. I had been trying to pay our annual property taxes online when the bank's website showed insufficient funds in our joint account. My first thought was that someone had made an error, some computer glitch that would resolve itself with a phone call. But when I drove to the bank and asked to see our transaction history, the truth spread across the desk in black and white printouts. The room suddenly felt too small, too bright. The customer service representative, a young woman with kind eyes and a professional smile, watched my face as I processed what I was seeing. Multiple transfers. Not just the $75,000 I had approved, but smaller amounts over the past 8 months. $5,000 in December, $8,000 in January, $12,000 in February. Sir, are you all right? Can I get you some water? I shook my head, my throat too tight for words. The total missing amount came to $103,000, nearly our entire joint savings. Money I had earned fixing servers at 3 in the morning, troubleshooting network failures during weekend emergencies, saving every possible dollar for 30 years. These transactions, I managed to say, pointing at the papers with a finger that wasn't quite steady. They all required 2 signatures for amounts over $5,000. She checked her computer screen, then looked back at me with something like pity. I'm sorry, Mr. Caldwell. According to our records, both account holders signed for all these transfers. Mrs. Brenda Caldwell and yourself. But I hadn't signed anything except that first transfer, which meant Brenda had been forging my signature for months. I drove home in silence, the bank statements folded neatly in my jacket pocket like evidence in a criminal case. The house looked different as I pulled into the driveway, smaller somehow, like a stage set that had been revealed as fake. Brenda's car sat in its usual spot next to the mailbox, and I could see kitchen lights glowing through the window. She was washing dishes when I walked in, humming something under her breath. The domestic scene felt surreal after what I had just learned. For a moment, I considered the possibility that there had been some terrible mistake, that she would have an explanation that would make everything make sense again. "Honey, you're home early," she said without turning around. "How were the taxes? Did you get them filed?" "No," I said quietly. "I didn't." Something in my voice made her turn around, dish towel still in her hands. The kitchen suddenly felt smaller, more fragile, like a soap bubble about to burst. There wasn't enough money in the account to pay them. The towel slipped from her fingers to the floor. For just a moment, I saw something flicker across her face. Guilt, maybe, or fear. But it was gone so quickly I might have imagined it. "That's impossible. We have plenty saved up." "Brenda." I pulled the bank statements from my pocket and set them on the counter between us. "We need to talk." She didn't look at the papers. Instead, she lifted her chin in a gesture I suddenly recognized as defiance rather than confidence. "George, I can explain." "I hope so, because according to these statements, someone has been taking money from our account for months. Someone who's been signing my name to authorization forms." The silence stretched between us like a wire pulled too tight. Outside, I could hear the neighbor's dog barking and the distant hum of traffic on Glenwood Avenue. Normal sounds from a normal world that no longer included me. "It was for Ryan," she said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. "Ryan's startup failed 3 months ago, Brenda. I saw the bankruptcy filing online. So where did all that extra money go?" Her jaw tightened. "He had other opportunities, other investments, things you wouldn't understand because you've never taken a real risk in your entire life." The words hit me like a physical blow. 30 years of marriage, and she was talking to me like I was a stranger. Worse than a stranger, like I was an obstacle to be managed. I took a risk when I gave him $75,000 the first time. Money I earned, Brenda. Money we both agreed to invest in his future. One investment, George. One safe, boring investment that you agonized over for days like it was our life savings. It was our life savings. She laughed, but there was no humor in it. "No, George. It was your paranoia fund. Your depression-era mentality money that you kept locked away like some kind of miser while opportunities passed us by." I stared at her, trying to recognize the woman I had married. The woman I had thought I knew for 3 decades. Those opportunities weren't ours, Brenda. They were Ryan's. And according to the bankruptcy court, they weren't even real. At least he tried to build something. At least someone in this family has ambition beyond fixing broken computers and collecting a modest paycheck. The kitchen felt like it was tilting sideways. Everything familiar had become foreign. Everything safe had become dangerous. Those broken computers paid for this house. They paid for Ryan's college. They paid for your car, your clothes, your book club, your Your job is not the same as having vision, George. Ryan sees possibilities. He takes chances. He's actually trying to create something meaningful instead of just maintaining other people's systems. I looked around our kitchen, at the upgrades I had saved for, the appliances I had researched and purchased carefully, the life I had built paycheck by paycheck. All of it suddenly felt hollow, like a house built on sand. Where is he now? What do you mean? Ryan, where is he now? I want to talk to him. Brenda's confidence wavered for the first time. He's in California, meeting with new investors. On whose money? She didn't answer, but she didn't need to. The bank statements told the whole story. That evening, I called Ryan's cell phone from my office while Brenda watched television in the living room. He answered on the third ring, his voice cheerful and distracted. Hey Dad, what's up? Kind of a busy week out here. I need to talk to you about the money, Ryan. A pause. In the background, I could hear restaurant noise, conversation, and clinking glasses. What money? The money your mother has been transferring from our joint account for the past 8 months. The money she's been taking without my permission. Another pause, longer this time. Dad, look, I know Mom was helping me out with some temporary cash flow issues, but everything's going to work out. This new venture is completely different from the food delivery thing. We're talking about blockchain technology now, cryptocurrency applications that could revolutionize. Ryan, I cut him off. I need that money back. The restaurant noise faded, as if he had stepped outside. When he spoke again, his voice had changed, become harder. Dad, let's be realistic here. That money is gone. Invested. It's working capital now in a business that could make all of us wealthy. Your last business went bankrupt 3 months ago. This is different. Completely different market, different technology, different team. Dad, you have to trust me on this. I trusted you with $75,000. The money I agreed to invest. But your mother took another $28,000 without asking me. Money we need for basic expenses, for taxes, for what? His voice had an edge I'd never heard before. For sitting in a bank account earning 2% interest? Dad, you're almost 60. When are you going to stop being afraid of everything? The words landed like physical blows. I'm not afraid of everything, Ryan. I'm cautious with money because I've had to be. Because someone in this family has to think about the future. No, Dad. Someone in this family has to think bigger than the future you're planning for. Your safe little retirement fund isn't going to change anything. It's not going to leave a legacy. It's not going to make a difference in the world. It's just going to keep you comfortable while you slowly fade away. I closed my eyes, pressing my free hand against my forehead. Ryan, I just want our money back. Or at least a plan for paying it back. I don't care about blockchain or cryptocurrency or any of it. I just want. You want what, Dad? You want me to get some dead-end job like yours? You want me to spend the next 30 years fixing other people's problems instead of solving real problems? You want me to be small and safe and invisible like you've always been? The phone felt heavy in my hand. Through the office window, I could see my reflection in the dark glass. And for a moment, I didn't recognize myself. Was that really what I looked like to my son? Small and safe and invisible? Dad, are you still there? I'm here. Look, I know this is hard. Change is always hard. But sometimes you have to let go of the past to make room for the future. Mom understands that. She's willing to take risks for the family. By stealing from me. By investing in me. In us. In something bigger than your paycheck-to-paycheck mentality. I hung up without saying goodbye. In the living room, I could hear canned laughter from whatever show Brenda was watching. Normal sounds from a normal evening in a normal house where nothing would ever be normal again. That night, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling while Brenda slept beside me. Every few minutes, my mind would replay fragments of the conversation with Ryan. Small and safe and invisible. Paycheck-to-paycheck mentality. Someone in this family has to think bigger. I thought about the first computer I had ever fixed, a broken desktop at a small accounting firm in 1992. The owner had been desperate, said he had 3 days of work trapped in the machine and couldn't afford to lose it. I had stayed until midnight, taking the system apart piece by piece until I found the failed hard drive controller. When I finally got his data recovered, he had tears in his eyes. "You saved my business," he said, writing me a check for $200. "I don't know how to thank you." That was the night I decided to start my own computer repair service. Not because I had grand visions of changing the world, but because I had discovered something I was genuinely good at. Something that helped people solve real problems with real solutions. Over the years, I had fixed thousands of computers, recovered countless files, helped small businesses get back online after crashes and viruses. I had never thought of it as small work. I had thought of it as necessary work, important work. But lying there in the dark, listening to Brenda's peaceful breathing, I began to understand that my son saw my entire career as a failure of imagination. That my wife saw our comfortable life as evidence of my lack of ambition. That 30 years of steady, reliable work had somehow marked me as someone who didn't dream big enough. The next morning, Brenda tried to pretend nothing had changed. She made coffee and scrambled eggs, asked about my schedule, mentioned that the gutters needed cleaning before winter. But there was a tension in her voice, a careful quality that hadn't been there before. "Did you talk to Ryan last night?" she asked as I was putting on my jacket. "Yes." And I looked at her across our kitchen, this woman I had shared a bed with for 30 years, and realized I was seeing her clearly for the first time. "He made it very clear where he stands. George, you have to understand. He's trying to build something. We're at a critical point where we either support him or we lose the opportunity forever." "What opportunity, Brenda?" "His last 3 startups have failed. He's 28 years old and has never held a steady job for longer than 6 months. What exactly are we supporting?" Her face flushed. "We're supporting his potential, his vision, his refusal to settle for mediocrity." The word hung between us like an accusation. Mediocrity. Was that what she thought our life together had been? Mediocre? "I see," I said quietly. "Do you? Do you really? Because I don't think you understand what it's like to watch your son struggle while his father sits on a pile of money, too scared to invest in anything meaningful. That pile of money represents 15 years of overtime work, Brenda. Weekend emergency calls, late-night system recoveries, jobs I took when other technicians wouldn't. Every dollar in that account I earned. And what good has it done anyone? What has all that careful saving accomplished except giving you an excuse to say no to every opportunity that comes our way?" I could feel something breaking inside me, some fundamental assumption about who we were as a family. I thought the money was for our retirement, for security when we're older and can't work anymore. Security. She said the word like it tasted bad. "George, security is an illusion. The only real security comes from taking risks, from building something that can grow. Your little retirement fund isn't security. It's fear." I left for work without kissing her goodbye, something I hadn't done in 20 years of marriage. At my office, I sat in my chair surrounded by the familiar tools of my trade. Circuit boards and diagnostic equipment, shelves of cables and adapters, 3 decades of accumulated expertise in keeping systems running when they broke down. For the first time since I'd started this business, it all felt pointless. I pulled out the bank statements and spread them across my desk. The numbers told a clear story. September, $75,000 with my signature. October, $5,000 with what looked like my signature but wasn't. November, $8,000, same forged signature. December through February, 3 more transfers, totaling another $20,000. I had built this business on attention to detail, on the kind of methodical problem-solving that found solutions other people missed. Now I applied those same skills to my own life, and what I found made my hands shake. The pattern wasn't random. The amounts had gotten larger over time, as if someone was testing how much they could take before I noticed. The timing coincided with Ryan's increasingly expensive lifestyle, his move to a better apartment, his new car, his trips to meet with investors in expensive cities. But the most damning evidence was what I found when I called the bank and asked for copies of the actual signature cards. The forgeries were good, but they weren't perfect. The pressure was wrong on several letters, the spacing slightly off. Someone had practiced, but not enough. By Thursday afternoon, I had made an appointment with Janet Morrison, the best family law attorney in Raleigh. By Friday morning, I had opened a new checking account at First National Bank and transferred the remaining funds from our joint savings. By Friday evening, I had documented every forged signature and every unauthorized transfer. I came home that night to find Brenda and Ryan waiting for me in the living room. He had driven down from California, apparently, to handle what they probably thought would be an easy conversation with the family pushover. "Dad, we need to talk," Ryan said as soon as I walked in. He looked tired, older somehow, like the stress of his failing businesses was finally catching up with him. "I agree." Brenda stood up from the sofa, her face set in the expression she used when she was preparing for a difficult conversation. "George, we've been thinking about the money situation, and we have a proposal." "I'm listening." Ryan leaned forward, his hands clasped between his knees. "Dad, I know you're upset about the additional funds Mom transferred. I understand that. But here's the thing, we can't just return money that's already been invested. It's not sitting in a bank account somewhere. It's working capital in active business ventures." "What business ventures?" "Several of them. I've diversified since the food delivery thing didn't work out. Cryptocurrency mining, blockchain applications, a partnership with a sustainable energy company in Nevada. The important thing is that the money is working." I set my jacket down carefully on the chair beside the door. "How much money are we talking about, Ryan?" "Total." He exchanged a quick glance with Brenda. "Total? Including the original investment you approved?" "About $110,000. $110,000. I said the number out loud, letting it hang in the air. "From our joint savings account. Over the past 8 months. It sounds like a lot when you say it that way, but Dad, you have to think about potential return on investment. Conservative estimates suggest we could see 500 to 800% growth within the next 2 years. I sat down in my recliner, the chair I had saved up to buy 5 years earlier when my old one finally wore out. "And if these ventures don't work out?" Ryan's confidence wavered slightly. "They will work out. The market research is solid, the technology is proven, and we have experienced partners who—" "But if they don't work out," I repeated. "What happens to our money then?" Brenda stepped forward. "George, that's exactly the kind of negative thinking that's been holding this family back for years. You can't build anything meaningful if you're constantly planning for failure." "I'm planning for reality, Brenda." Ryan's track record suggests that failure is a very real possibility. The room went silent. Ryan's face hardened, and when he spoke again, his voice had lost all pretense of warmth. "Dad, let's be honest here. You've never achieved anything significant in your entire life. You just fix other people's computers. I'm actually building a future, creating something that matters. The money Mom invested in me is the smartest financial decision this family has ever made." The words landed like physical blows, but I kept my voice level. "And what about the money she took without my permission? What about the forged signatures?" Brenda stepped between us, her chin raised in defiance. "I did what I had to do to protect our son's future. Someone in this family needs to have courage instead of hiding money under the mattress like some Depression-era relic." I looked at them both, standing together in our living room, united in their conviction that I was the problem. That my 30 years of steady work and careful planning were somehow evidence of moral failure. That my desire to keep the money I had earned was selfish and small-minded. "I see," I said quietly. Ryan leaned back on the sofa, apparently satisfied that he had made his point. "Look, Dad, I know this is hard for you. Change is always hard. But sometimes you have to let go of the past to make room for the future. We're asking you to trust us, to believe in something bigger than your paycheck-to-paycheck mentality." I stood up slowly, my knees creaking in a way that reminded me I was approaching 60. "I need some time to think about all this." Brenda's expression softened slightly. "Of course, honey. This is a big decision. Take all the time you need." But as I walked toward my office, I heard Ryan say something under his breath to his mother. "He'll come around. He always does. Dad doesn't have the backbone to stay mad for long." I stopped in the doorway, my hand on the frame. Something shifted inside me, like a gear finally clicking into its proper position. For 30 years, I had been the peacemaker in this family, the one who avoided conflict and looked for compromise, the one who paid the bills and fixed the problems while other people made the decisions. That night, I didn't sleep. Instead, I sat at my computer and began to research. I looked up every business venture Ryan had mentioned, traced the corporate filings and partnership agreements he claimed to be part of. What I found was even worse than I had expected. The sustainable energy company in Nevada had been shut down by the SEC for securities fraud 6 months earlier. The cryptocurrency mining operation existed only as a website with stock photos and fake testimonials. The blockchain applications were vaporware, projects that had never progressed beyond PowerPoint presentations. My son hadn't just failed at multiple businesses. He had been systematically lying to us about what those businesses actually were. He had taken $110,000 of our money and lost it all on ventures that were either fraudulent or imaginary. But the real revelation came when I traced the bank transfers more carefully. The money hadn't gone to business accounts. It had gone directly to Ryan's personal checking account, then immediately disappeared into cash withdrawals and payments to luxury car dealerships, high-end apartment complexes, and expensive restaurants. My son had stolen our retirement savings to fund a lifestyle he hadn't earned, and my wife had helped him do it. I printed out everything I had found and put it in a manila folder with the bank statements and signature analysis. Evidence, organized and documented with the same attention to detail I brought to diagnosing computer problems. By Sunday morning, I knew exactly what I was going to do. The confrontation came that afternoon. Ryan was packing to drive back to California, and Brenda was in the kitchen making his favorite cookies for the road. The domestic scene felt obscene given what I now knew. "Before you leave," I said to Ryan, "I want to show you something." I set the manila folder on the kitchen table and opened it to the first page. Bank statements with the forged signatures highlighted in yellow. "These are the transfers your mother made without my knowledge or consent. Do you see the dates? Do you see the amounts?" Ryan glanced at the papers without much interest. "Dad, we already talked about this. I know Mom was helping me out, and I appreciate. This is where the money went." I turned to the next page, printouts of his bank account that I had obtained through methods I probably shouldn't explain to my family. Direct deposits from our joint savings account, followed immediately by cash withdrawals and luxury purchases. Not business investments, Ryan. Personal expenses. The color drained from his face. "How did you get my bank records?" "I have friends in the industry, people who specialize in financial investigations." That was only partially true, but it sounded better than explaining how vulnerable most banking websites are to someone who understands network security. Brenda snatched the papers from the table. "This is invasion of privacy, George. You have no right to." "I have every right to trace stolen funds from my own account." I turned to the next section of documentation. "This is the sustainable energy company in Nevada that you invested our money with, Ryan. Notice the SEC shutdown notice dated 6 months ago. Fraud charges pending." Ryan's face went white. "I didn't know about that. The partners never told me." "Because there were no partners. Because it was a scam from day one, and you would have known that if you had done even basic research instead of just looking for people willing to take our money." I kept turning pages, showing them every lie, every fake business, every impossible return on investment promise that had convinced them to steal from me. With each revelation, Ryan shrank deeper into his chair, while Brenda's face grew more defensive and angry. "All right, George, you've made your point," she said finally. "Ryan made some mistakes. The investments didn't work out the way he hoped. But that's no reason to destroy your own family." "I'm not destroying anything, Brenda. I'm just showing you what your son has been doing with our retirement money. $110,000, gone. Spent on rent and car payments and restaurant bills while he pretended to be building the future." Ryan found his voice again, but it came out smaller than before. "Dad, I know this looks bad. I know I should have been more careful with the research. But that doesn't mean the money is completely lost. I still have connections, people who are working on legitimate projects. Stop. The word came out harder than I intended. Just stop lying to me, Ryan. There are no connections. There are no legitimate projects. There's just you, living beyond your means on money you stole from your parents. Brenda slammed her hand down on the table. Enough. You want to blame us for trying to build something better? Fine. But don't pretend you're the victim here, George. You're the one who's been selfishly hoarding money while opportunities passed us by. You're the one who's too scared to take any real risks. And you're the one who's been forging my signature on bank documents. That's called fraud, Brenda. That's a felony. The kitchen went dead silent. Outside, I could hear children playing in the neighbor's yard. Normal sounds from a normal Sunday afternoon. But inside our house, everything had changed forever. You wouldn't, Brenda said finally. You wouldn't press charges against your own wife. I closed the manila folder and looked at both of them. My wife of 30 years and my son who thought I had never achieved anything significant. I want the money back. All of it. And I want a written plan for how you're going to repay it. Ryan laughed, but there was no humor in it. Dad, that's impossible. The money's gone. It's been spent. Even if I wanted to pay it back, I don't have $110,000 lying around. Then get a job. Get 2 jobs. Get whatever jobs you need to get to pay back what you stole. What I stole? Ryan's voice rose to something close to a shout. I didn't steal anything. I took a loan from my family to invest in our future. That's what families do. They support each other instead of keeping score like some kind of accountant. Families don't forge signatures, Ryan. Families don't lie about where the money is going. Families don't steal retirement funds to pay for luxury apartments. Brenda stepped between us again, her face flushed with anger. For 30 years, I have supported your boring, safe, small-minded approach to everything. I've never complained about your dead-end job or your refusal to take any real risks. But I will not stand here and let you destroy my son's future because you're too cowardly to believe in anything bigger than your precious savings account. Something crystallized inside me, like a software problem that had finally revealed its solution. You think my work is worthless. You think our life together has been a waste of time. You think I'm a coward and a failure. I think you're afraid, she said more quietly. I think you've been afraid for so long that you don't even remember what it feels like to take a chance on something that matters. I nodded slowly. And you think Ryan matters more than our marriage. More than the promises we made to each other. More than the life we built together. I think some things are more important than money, George. So do I. I picked up the manila folder and walked toward the door. That's why I'm filing for divorce tomorrow morning. The silence behind me was absolute. I could hear my own footsteps, the creak of the floorboards, the sound of my jacket being pulled from the closet. But no voices, no protests, no attempts to call me back or apologize or ask for another chance. That silence told me everything I needed to know about where I stood in my own family. I spent that night in a motel room near the interstate, staring at the ceiling and listening to trucks rumble past in the darkness. For the first time in 30 years, I was completely alone. No wife sleeping beside me, no family photos on the walls, no comfortable routines to anchor me to the life I had built. It should have felt terrifying. Instead, it felt like relief. Monday morning, I walked into Janet Morrison's law office with my manila folder and a clear sense of purpose. She reviewed my documentation with the thoroughness of someone who had seen similar cases before. This is very comprehensive, she said finally. The forged signatures alone would be enough for both criminal charges and a clean divorce settlement. But the pattern of systematic theft makes this a strong case for full asset protection. I don't want to destroy them, I said. I just want to protect what's left of my retirement savings. Mr. Caldwell, your wife has been committing felony fraud for 8 months. Your son has been knowingly receiving stolen funds. This isn't a matter of family disagreement. This is criminal behavior that could result in prison time for both of them. I sat in her office, surrounded by law books and legal documents, and tried to imagine Brenda in an orange jumpsuit. It should have given me satisfaction, but instead it just made me tired. What are my options? We can file for immediate asset freezing to prevent any additional unauthorized transfers. We can file for divorce with cause, which would protect your retirement accounts and pension from any division settlement. And if you choose, we can refer the criminal evidence to the district attorney's office. And if I don't pursue criminal charges, then you still get the clean divorce and asset protection. But they face no legal consequences for stealing over $100,000 from you. I thought about Ryan's voice when he called me a failure, about Brenda's expression when she said our life together had been mediocre, about 30 years of working overtime to save money that they had stolen without feeling any guilt or shame. File everything, I said. Divorce, asset protection, and criminal referral. All of it. Are you sure? Once we start this process, there's no going back to the way things were. I looked out her office window at the city I had lived in for 3 decades, where I had built a business and raised a family and tried to be the kind of man people could depend on. The way things were is already gone. I'm just making it official. The legal machinery moved faster than I had expected. By Wednesday, our joint accounts were frozen pending investigation. By Friday, Brenda had been served with divorce papers and a restraining order preventing her from accessing any of my retirement funds. By the following Monday, Ryan had been contacted by the district attorney's office about the fraud charges. I moved into a furnished apartment downtown, a clean 1-bedroom place with windows that faced east toward the sunrise. For the first time in years, I could see the sky when I woke up in the morning. I bought exactly the food I wanted to eat, watched exactly the television shows I enjoyed, went to bed when I was tired instead of when someone else expected me to. The silence was different than it had been in the motel. Not empty, but peaceful, like the quiet of a well-tuned system running exactly as it should. Brenda called twice during the first week, both times with the same message. I was being selfish and vindictive. I was destroying the family over money. If I truly loved her and Ryan, I would drop the charges and work together to solve the problem. I didn't return the calls. Ryan called once, late at night, drunk and belligerent. He accused me of ruining his life out of spite, of being too small-minded to understand that sometimes you have to break a few rules to achieve greatness. He said I had always been jealous of his ambition, that I couldn't stand watching him succeed where I had failed. I listened to his slurred words for exactly 3 minutes, then hung up and blocked his number. The criminal trial began 4 months later. I sat in the courthouse gallery, watching my wife and son at the defendant's table with their court-appointed attorneys. Brenda had lost weight, her face gaunt and tired in a way that made her look older than her 56 years. Ryan wore a cheap suit that didn't fit properly, his confident swagger replaced by nervous fidgeting. The prosecutor presented my evidence with methodical precision. Bank records projected on screens, signature analysis comparing Brenda's forgeries to my authentic autograph, financial documentation showing exactly where every stolen dollar had gone. The defense tried to paint it as a family misunderstanding, a case of poor communication rather than deliberate fraud. But numbers don't lie. Signatures don't forge themselves. And when the prosecutor asked me to describe the impact of their theft, I kept my answer simple. I worked for 30 years to save that money. Every dollar represented hours of my life, nights and weekends when I chose work over leisure because I wanted to provide security for my family. They took that away from me without permission, without guilt, and without any plan to return it. They stole my future. The jury deliberated for less than 2 hours. Guilty on all counts of fraud, forgery, and theft. Brenda received 18 months in minimum security prison plus 5 years probation. Ryan got 2 years plus restitution requirements that would follow him until every penny was repaid. I felt no satisfaction when the verdicts were read. No sense of triumph or vindication. Just a quiet recognition that the system had worked the way it was supposed to work. Actions had consequences. Choices had prices. Justice had been served. After the sentencing, I walked out of the courthouse into bright October sunshine. The air felt cleaner somehow, like a storm had finally passed. I drove home to my apartment, made myself a simple dinner, and went to bed early for the first time in months without checking over my shoulder. The divorce was finalized 3 weeks later. Janet Morrison's prediction had been accurate. with criminal convictions for fraud. Brenda had no claim to any of my retirement funds or pension benefits. The house would be sold to pay legal fees and restitution, but I kept my business, my savings, and my peace of mind. You know, Janet said as we reviewed the final papers, in 30 years of family law, I've never seen someone document a case this thoroughly. You should consider a career change to forensic accounting. I laughed for the first time in months. I think I'll stick with fixing computers. Less complicated than fixing people. But as autumn turned to winter, I discovered that starting over at 59 wasn't as terrifying as I had expected. Without the constant drain of supporting other people's bad decisions, my business began to grow. I could afford to be more selective about clients, to turn down the emergency weekend calls that had eaten up so many years of my life. I joined a chess club that met Wednesday evenings at the community center. The members were mostly retirees and graduate students, people who appreciated strategy and patience over flash and promises. For the first time since high school, I had friends who knew nothing about my family drama and didn't care about my income or ambitions. They just wanted someone who could play a decent game and contribute to the conversation. "You're improving rapidly," said Harold Weinstein, a retired mathematics professor who had become my regular opponent. "Most people your age are too set in their patterns to learn new strategies." "I'm discovering I have more capacity for change than I thought," I replied, moving my bishop to threaten his queen. Harold studied the board with the concentration of someone who had spent decades teaching complex problems to skeptical students. "Change is like debugging code, isn't it? You have to be willing to eliminate what isn't working, even if you've invested a lot of time in making it work." I hadn't told him I was in tech, but somehow he had intuited the connection. Exactly. Sometimes the most elegant solution is to start with a clean slate. Through the chess club, I met other people rebuilding their lives after major disruptions. Margaret had divorced after 25 years when she discovered her husband's gambling addiction. David had retired early from teaching after a budget crisis eliminated his department. Susan had moved to Raleigh to care for her elderly mother and found herself starting fresh in a new city at age 58. None of them treated my story as unusual or tragic. They understood that life sometimes requires you to cut away what's damaged in order to save what's healthy. They talked about their fresh starts with optimism rather than regret, focusing on opportunities rather than losses. "The hardest part," Margaret told me over coffee after a particularly brutal chess match, "is learning to trust your own judgment again. When people you love betray you, it makes you question everything you thought you knew about relationships. How do you get past that? You start small. You let people earn your trust through actions rather than words. And you remember that not everyone who seems nice is actually good, but not everyone who is quiet is actually weak." I thought about that conversation often over the following months. Margaret was right. I had confused being quiet with being weak, being careful with being afraid. But there was nothing weak about building a business from nothing, saving money for 30 years, or standing up to theft and fraud regardless of who committed it. Spring brought unexpected developments. The sale of the house generated enough money to pay most of Ryan's restitution, reducing his financial obligations significantly. I could have objected, could have insisted that he serve the full penalty regardless of his mother's assistance. Instead, I chose to let the legal process run its course without interference. I received a letter from him in May, forwarded through Janet Morrison's office. His handwriting was smaller than I remembered, more careful, as if he had written and rewritten the message multiple times. "Dad," it began, "I know I have no right to contact you after everything that happened. I know an apology can't undo the damage I caused or return the money I wasted. But I wanted you to know that I've been thinking about what you said during the trial, about hours of your life and nights and weekends you spent working for our security. I'm working construction now, 10 hours a day, 6 days a week. My hands are torn up and my back aches every night, but for the first time in my life, I understand what it means to earn money instead of just spending it. I understand why you valued every dollar, why you saved instead of spending, why you called it security instead of fear. I'm not writing to ask for forgiveness or reconciliation. I'm writing to tell you that I finally understand what you were trying to teach me all those years. Work matters. Honesty matters. Keeping your word matters. I'm 29 years old, and I'm just learning lessons you tried to show me when I was 12. I hope you're happy in your new life. I hope you've found people who appreciate what you built instead of just what you could give them. You deserved better than what Mom and I put you through. Your son, Ryan. I read the letter 3 times, then put it in my desk drawer. Not because I was ready to resume contact, but because it represented something I hadn't expected, evidence that consequences could sometimes lead to growth rather than just punishment. Summer brought a different kind of surprise. I was debugging a network issue for a small nonprofit when the executive director mentioned they were looking for a part-time technology instructor for their adult education program. We serve people who are trying to get back on their feet, she explained. Former inmates, recovering addicts, people who've been out of the workforce for various reasons. Basic computer skills can make the difference between getting hired and staying unemployed. I thought about it for a week before accepting the position. Teaching twice a week at the community center, helping people who understood what it meant to start over with nothing but determination and a willingness to learn. My first class included 8 students ranging in age from 22 to 57. Maria was a former meth addict who had been clean for 18 months and needed computer skills to work in her sponsor's accounting office. James had been released from prison after serving 7 years for robbery and discovered that the world had gone digital while he was away. Linda had been a stay-at-home mother for 20 years before her husband left, taking most of their savings and leaving her to support herself for the first time since college. I know this seems overwhelming, I told them during our first session. But learning technology is like learning any other skill. You start with basics, you practice regularly, and you don't give up when things don't work the first time. James raised his hand. What if we're too old to learn this stuff? What if our brains just can't handle it anymore? I looked at his weathered face, saw the uncertainty there, and remembered how I had felt walking into that chess club for the first time. Age isn't the problem. Fear is the problem. I started learning chess again at 59, and I'm better at it now than I was at 30. Your brain doesn't stop working just because you've made some mistakes. Over the following weeks, I watched them struggle with concepts that seemed simple to me but represented genuine challenges for people who had never used email or navigated websites. I learned patience I didn't know I possessed, found satisfaction in small victories I had never experienced in my commercial work. When Maria finally sent her first email, a message to her daughter who lived in another state, she started crying at the computer. I can talk to her whenever I want now. I don't have to wait for her to call me. When James successfully completed an online job application, he stood up and shook my hand with the solemnity of someone who had just crossed a significant threshold. Thank you for not giving up on me, Mr. Caldwell. Most people write me off the minute they hear I was in prison. Everyone deserves a chance to learn and grow, I told him. Mistakes don't define you forever unless you let them. By September, 6 of my 8 original students had found employment that required the computer skills they had learned in class. I started a second session, then a third. Word spread through the community about the patient tech instructor who treated everyone with respect regardless of their background. The nonprofit asked if I would consider expanding to a full-time position, developing a comprehensive technology training program for their clients. The salary was less than I could make in private consulting, but the benefits package was decent, and the work felt more meaningful than anything I had done in years. I accepted the offer on a Thursday afternoon, then celebrated by treating myself to dinner at a restaurant I had never tried. Sitting alone at a table by the window, I realized that for the first time since the divorce, I felt genuinely happy rather than just relieved. My phone buzzed with a text message from Harold. Chess club tonight. Margaret wants revenge for last week's humiliation. I smiled and typed back, tell her I'll go easy on her. I'm in a good mood. Dangerous attitude for chess. Also, Susan mentioned she's bringing homemade cookies. I finished my dinner, left a generous tip, and drove to the community center. The chess club had grown to 12 regular members, and Thursday evenings had become the highlight of my week. People who enjoyed each other's company without drama or hidden agendas, who could compete fiercely over a game board and then share dessert like old friends. Susan's cookies were chocolate chip with sea salt, still warm from the oven. Margaret had indeed been plotting revenge, opening with a Sicilian defense that caught me off guard. Harold was teaching a new member the basics of endgame strategy with the patience of someone who genuinely enjoyed sharing knowledge. "George," Susan said during a break between matches, "I hope you don't mind me asking, but you seem different lately, happier somehow, more settled." I considered how to answer that. 6 months earlier, I had been a bitter man obsessed with documenting betrayal and pursuing justice. Now I was someone who looked forward to teaching struggling adults how to format documents and send emails. "I think I finally figured out who I want to be," I said. "It took me 59 years, but better late than never." "And who do you want to be?" I looked around the room at my friends, people who had found me worthy of their time and attention without knowing anything about my income or career achievements. Someone useful. Someone who helps other people solve problems instead of creating them. Margaret rejoined us, having just defeated another opponent with a ruthless queen sacrifice. "That sounds like the most practical approach to happiness I've ever heard." "Practical?" I laughed. "My ex-wife would say that's exactly my problem. Too practical, too careful, too focused on boring details instead of grand visions." "Your ex-wife," Harold observed dryly, "is in prison for fraud. Perhaps her opinion on practical matters carries less weight than it once did." The room erupted in laughter, and I realized that these people understood something my family never had. Being practical wasn't the opposite of being ambitious. Being careful wasn't the same as being afraid. Building something slowly and steadily wasn't less valuable than chasing get-rich-quick schemes. October marked the first anniversary of my divorce filing. I spent the evening going through financial records, not from obsession but from simple curiosity about how much my life had changed in 12 months. The numbers told a remarkable story. Without the constant drain of supporting other people's lifestyle choices, my savings had grown by $47,000 despite the legal fees and transition costs. My business income had increased by 30% as I focused on higher-value clients who appreciated quality work. My stress levels, as measured by my doctor during my annual physical, had dropped to the lowest point in years. But the real changes couldn't be quantified in spreadsheets. I slept well at night without wondering what financial crisis would hit tomorrow. I made decisions based on my own values rather than other people's expectations. I had friendships built on mutual respect rather than financial obligation. The anniversary also brought an unexpected visitor. I was grading homework assignments from my evening computer class when someone knocked on my apartment door. Through the peephole, I saw a young woman I didn't recognize, holding what appeared to be a small gift bag. "Mr. Caldwell? My name is Jennifer Martinez. I was hoping I could talk to you for a few minutes." I opened the door cautiously. "I'm sorry. Do we know each other?" "I'm Ryan's girlfriend. Well, ex-girlfriend now. But I wanted to thank you for what you did." This was not a conversation I had expected to have. "I'm not sure I understand. Could I come in?" This is a little awkward to explain in the hallway. Against my better judgment, I let her into my living room. She was younger than I had expected, maybe 25, with the kind of nervous energy that comes from rehearsing a difficult conversation. "I know you probably don't want to hear anything about Ryan," she began, "but I thought you should know how much you changed his life." "I'm listening." When we first started dating 2 years ago, he was constantly talking about his big plans, his next business venture, how he was going to revolutionize whatever industry he was focused on that week. He never had a regular job, never paid his own rent, always had some excuse for why his parents should support his lifestyle while he built his empire. She paused, as if deciding how much to reveal. I kept thinking he would eventually grow up, take some responsibility, maybe get a normal job like everyone else. But after the trial, after he got out of jail and started working construction, he completely changed. Changed how? He pays his own rent now. He bought his own car, nothing fancy, just reliable transportation. He talks about saving money for the future instead of spending money he doesn't have. And he never, ever talks about get-rich-quick schemes anymore. I wasn't sure how to respond to this information. That sounds like good news for Ryan. It is, but it's also why we broke up. She smiled sadly. Turns out I was attracted to the fantasy version of him, the one who promised we'd be rich someday. The real Ryan. The one who comes home tired from honest work and wants to stay in on weekends to save money, isn't as exciting as I thought I wanted. The irony wasn't lost on me. So you're thanking me for turning your boyfriend into someone you didn't want to date? I'm thanking you for turning him into someone who might actually build a real life instead of chasing impossible dreams. He's going to make some woman very happy someday. Someone who appreciates stability and honesty over flash and promises. She handed me the gift bag. This is from both of us, sort of. Ryan doesn't know I'm here, but he's been wanting to send you something for months. He's too ashamed to contact you directly. Inside the bag was a small wooden box, handmade and carefully sanded. The lid was engraved with a simple message. To someone who taught me that work has dignity. Thank you. R. I held the box for a long moment, feeling the smooth wood under my fingers. It wasn't expensive or elaborate, but it was clearly made with care and attention to detail. The kind of gift that took time rather than money. He made this himself? In his spare time after work. Took him almost 3 months to get it right. He's been learning woodworking from one of the older guys on his construction crew. After Jennifer left, I sat in my living room holding the wooden box and thinking about the strange path that had led me here. A year ago, I had been a bitter man focused on punishment and revenge. Now I was holding a handmade gift from the son who had stolen my retirement savings, feeling something closer to pride than anger. The box had a simple latch and opened to reveal a soft felt interior, empty except for a small folded note. Ryan's handwriting, more careful than I remembered. Dad, I know I can never give back the years of work this represents, but I wanted you to have something I made with my own hands. Something that took time and patience and getting it wrong before getting it right. I'm learning that those are the things that matter. I hope someday you might be proud of the man I'm trying to become. I read the note twice, then put it back in the box and set the whole thing on my desk. Not forgiveness exactly, but acknowledgement that people could change if they faced real consequences and chose to learn from them. The following week brought another anniversary. 1 year since I had started teaching at the nonprofit. My supervisor asked if I would speak at their annual fundraising dinner, sharing my perspective on adult education and second chances. I spent several days preparing remarks that wouldn't sound preachy or self-congratulatory. The audience would include donors, volunteers, and graduates from various programs. People who understood both the challenges and the possibilities of starting over. A year ago, I told the room full of supporters. I thought my life was essentially over. My family had betrayed me, my savings were gone, and I was facing the future alone at almost 60 years old. I felt like a failure who had wasted decades building something that could be destroyed overnight. But this program taught me something I hadn't expected to learn. The skills we teach here, computer literacy, job readiness, financial planning, those are just tools. The real education happens when people discover they're capable of growth and change regardless of their age or their mistakes. I came here thinking I would help other people rebuild their lives. Instead, I learned how to rebuild my own. The students I work with have shown me more courage and determination than I thought possible. They've taught me that starting over isn't a punishment for failure. It's an opportunity to get things right. The applause was warm and sustained, but the real reward came afterward when several of my former students approached to thank me for believing in them. Maria introduced me to her daughter, who had driven from Charlotte to attend the dinner. James showed me pictures of his grandson, who was learning to use a computer with James's help. Linda announced that she had been promoted to office manager at the insurance company where she had started as a data entry clerk. Mr. Caldwell, Linda said, you always told us that patience and practice would pay off, but you never mentioned how good it would feel to succeed at something you earned through your own effort. That's the best part, I replied. Nobody can take away what you've built for yourself. Winter settled over Raleigh with unusual gentleness, bringing clear skies and comfortable temperatures that made the city feel welcoming rather than harsh. I established new routines that felt sustainable rather than temporary. Morning coffee while reading news on my tablet, afternoon walks through the downtown area, evening chess matches or dinner with friends from the club. For the first time in years, I could plan more than a month ahead without worrying about what crisis might disrupt everything. I scheduled a vacation to visit Asheville in the spring, something I had always wanted to do but never felt financially secure enough to attempt. I researched weekend workshops on furniture making, inspired by Ryan's wooden box and curious about working with my hands in a new way. Small pleasures that had been impossible when every dollar was spoken for and every decision was subject to other people's approval. The holidays passed quietly but not lonely. The chess club organized a potluck dinner that felt more like family than any gathering I had attended in years. Harold's wife prepared traditional Jewish dishes I had never tried. Susan brought her famous cookies and homemade bread. Margaret shared stories from her travels before marriage that revealed an adventurous spirit I hadn't suspected. "You know what I love about this group?" Margaret said as we were cleaning up after dinner. "Nobody here is trying to impress anyone else. We're just enjoying each other's company. It's the difference between friendship and performance," Harold agreed. "Most social situations require you to be someone other than yourself. This is one of the few places where being yourself is enough." I thought about that observation for days afterward. How much energy had I spent over the years trying to be the person my family wanted me to be? The provider who never questioned spending decisions, the supporter who never demanded accountability, the peacemaker who never insisted on fairness? Being myself, it turned out, was both simpler and more satisfying than I had expected. Spring arrived early, bringing cherry blossoms and warm afternoons that made Raleigh feel like a city worth exploring rather than just a place to work and survive. I took that trip to Asheville, spent 3 days hiking mountain trails and visiting craft breweries, staying in a bed and breakfast that specialized in locally sourced meals. For the first time since Maria died, my first wife, who had passed away 10 years before I met Brenda, I felt genuinely content with my own company. I could enjoy a beautiful sunset without feeling obligated to share it with someone else. I could change plans on a whim without consulting anyone else's schedule or preferences. Freedom, it turned out, was worth more than I had ever imagined. The trip also gave me perspective on how much my life had improved since the divorce. A year and a half earlier, spending money on a vacation would have triggered guilt and anxiety about retirement security. Now I could afford both the trip and continued savings growth, because I was no longer supporting other people's financial mistakes. I returned to Raleigh refreshed and ready to expand my teaching responsibilities. The nonprofit had received a grant to develop specialized training for military veterans transitioning to civilian careers, and they asked if I would design the curriculum. Working with veterans presented different challenges than my previous students. These were people who understood discipline and hard work but struggled with civilian workplace culture and technology that had evolved rapidly during their deployments. They needed technical skills but also translation help, learning how military experience applied to private sector opportunities. "The hardest part," explained Tom, a former Army sergeant who had served 3 tours in Afghanistan, "is feeling like your experience doesn't count for anything in the civilian world, like you wasted years of your life learning skills that nobody values." I understood that feeling more than he probably realized. Your experience counts. Leadership, problem-solving under pressure, working with diverse teams, training others, those are exactly the skills employers want. We just need to help you translate military language into civilian language. Over the following months, I watched these veterans rediscover confidence in their abilities. They learned to describe their service experience in terms that hiring managers could understand and appreciate. They mastered technology that seemed foreign at first but became natural with practice and patience. The success rate was remarkable. 87% of program graduates found employment within 6 months, often in leadership roles that utilized both their military experience and newly acquired technical skills. "You have a gift for this," my supervisor told me during my annual review. "The combination of technical expertise and genuine empathy is rare. Have you considered pursuing formal training in adult education?" I hadn't, but the suggestion intrigued me. At 60, was I too old to go back to school myself? To learn new approaches to teaching and counseling that could make me more effective in this work I had grown to love? The answer, I decided, was the same one I gave my students when they worried about their age or their past mistakes. You're never too old to learn something that matters to you. I enrolled in a graduate certificate program in adult education, taking evening classes 2 nights a week while maintaining my full-time teaching load. The coursework challenged me in ways I hadn't experienced since college, forcing me to examine my assumptions about learning and motivation. My fellow students were mostly younger teachers and social workers, but they welcomed me without question or condescension. In study groups and class discussions, my technical background and life experience proved valuable in ways I hadn't expected. George brings a different perspective, explained Sarah, a social worker in her 30s who had become a close friend and study partner. Most of us learn theories about adult development and career transitions in textbooks. He's actually lived through major life changes and knows what it feels like to start over. The program also connected me with research on resilience and post-traumatic growth, the phenomenon where people emerge from crisis stronger and more capable than before. Reading academic studies on the topic, I recognized my own journey in the data. People who successfully rebuild after major losses often develop increased appreciation for relationships, clearer personal priorities, and greater confidence in their ability to handle future challenges. They discover strengths they didn't know they possessed and form deeper connections based on authenticity rather than convenience. The research validated what I had experienced intuitively. The divorce and family betrayal, painful as they had forced me to develop parts of myself that had been dormant for decades. I was more independent, more selective about relationships, and more confident in my own judgment than I had ever been during my marriage. 2 years after the divorce, I received an unexpected phone call from Brenda. She had been released early for good behavior and was living in a halfway house while transitioning back to civilian life. Her voice sounded different, smaller, more tentative, stripped of the confident authority I remembered. "George, I know I have no right to call you. I know I probably shouldn't even have your number. But I wanted to apologize properly, without lawyers or court proceedings or other people listening." I let her talk without interrupting, curious about what she might say when forced to face the consequences of her choices without anyone to blame or deflect to. "I've had a lot of time to think about what we did, and I understand now that it wasn't about supporting Ryan's dreams. It was about my own dreams, my own disappointment with how ordinary our life felt. I convinced myself that you were holding us back, that your caution was weakness instead of wisdom." She paused, and I could hear traffic in the background, the sounds of a city that had moved on without her. "I destroyed a 30-year marriage because I was ashamed of being married to someone who worked hard instead of talking big. I threw away the security you provided because I wanted excitement instead of stability. And I taught our son that stealing was acceptable if you called it investing. What do you want from me, Brenda? Nothing. I don't expect forgiveness or reconciliation or even friendship. I just wanted you to know that I understand what I lost, and I understand that it was my choice to lose it. You deserved better than what Ryan and I put you through." The conversation lasted only a few more minutes. She told me she was working at a call center, living in subsidized housing, attending mandatory financial counseling sessions. She asked nothing about my life, made no requests for help or contact, expressed no hope for future relationship. After hanging up, I felt neither satisfaction nor sadness. Just a quiet recognition that some chapters in life close completely, without epilogue or sequel. Brenda had become a stranger who happened to share some history with me, nothing more or less. That summer, I completed my graduate certificate program with a final project on technology training for career transitions. The research had given me tools to be more effective in my teaching, but more importantly, it had validated my decision to pursue meaningful work over maximum income. My thesis advisor, Dr. Patricia Williams, encouraged me to consider pursuing a full master's degree. "Your combination of technical expertise, life experience, and genuine care for student success is unusual. You could make significant contributions to the field." I thanked her for the suggestion but declined. At 61, I had found work that fulfilled me and a life that felt sustainable and satisfying. I didn't need additional credentials to validate my value or purpose. The chess club threw a graduation party that felt more meaningful than any academic ceremony could have been. These people had supported me through the challenges of returning to school, celebrated my small victories, and helped me study for exams. They understood that learning was valuable for its own sake, not just for the credentials it provided. To George, Harold toasted, raising his coffee mug in the community center's modest meeting room, who proves that the best revenge is living well. To second chances, Margaret added, and the wisdom to recognize them when they come. To friendship, Susan concluded, the kind that doesn't require explanations or apologies, just appreciation. I looked around the room at these people who had become my chosen family and realized that everything I had lost in the divorce had been replaced by something better. Not more expensive or more impressive, but more genuine, more reliable, more aligned with who I actually was rather than who I thought I should be. The final surprise came in early fall, 3 years after the divorce. Ryan contacted me through the nonprofit, asking if we could meet for coffee. Not as father and son, he clarified, but as two adults who had learned difficult lessons and wanted to acknowledge how much they had both changed. I agreed to meet, curious about the man he claimed to have become. He looked different, thinner, more weathered, with calloused hands and a quiet manner that replaced his former confident swagger. We sat across from each other in a downtown cafe, two middle-aged men who shared a complicated history and an uncertain future. I don't expect forgiveness, he began, echoing his mother's earlier words. I don't deserve it, and I'm not asking for it. But I wanted you to know that prison taught me things I should have learned from you years earlier. Such as, that work has dignity regardless of how much it pays. That keeping your word matters more than making promises. That the people who love you shouldn't have to pay for the privilege. He told me about his life since release, the construction job that had become a career, the apartment he rented and maintained himself, the evening classes where he was learning business accounting through community college. Small accomplishments that represented genuine progress rather than grand gestures. I'm dating someone, he said eventually. A woman who works at the hardware store where I buy supplies. She doesn't know about my past yet, about what I did to you and Mom. But when I tell her, and I will tell her, I want to be able to say that I made things right. What does making things right look like to you? Paying back every penny I stole with interest. Not because a court ordered it, but because it's what you deserve. And never asking you for anything ever again. We talked for an hour, carefully avoiding anything that might sound like reconciliation or renewed relationship. But when we parted, I felt something I hadn't expected. Respect for the person he was trying to become, separate from disappointment in the person he had been. 3 months later, I received a check for $5,000 with a note explaining it was the first installment on full repayment of the stolen funds. No requests for acknowledgement or gratitude, no suggestions for future contact. Just a businessman honoring a debt. I deposited the check and sent a brief email confirming receipt. Not forgiveness, not relationship, but acknowledgement that he was keeping his word. On Christmas Eve, exactly 4 years after my first conversation with Janet Morrison about divorce proceedings, I sat in my apartment grading final exams from the semester's computer literacy classes. Outside, snow was falling lightly, coating the city in peaceful white that made everything look clean and new. My phone buzzed with messages from chess club friends, former students, colleagues from the nonprofit. People who had become important to me because of shared interests and mutual respect rather than obligation or history. Margaret, Merry Christmas to the best chess player I know. After me, obviously. Harold, enjoy the quiet. Remember that solitude is different from loneliness. Tom, the veteran from my first military transition class. Thanks again for helping me find my way. New job starts in January. Management track. I looked around my apartment. Comfortable, clean, organized according to my own preferences and needs. Photos from my Asheville trip, books on teaching and learning, the wooden box Ryan had made displayed on my desk. Evidence of a life rebuilt from scratch into something authentic and sustainable. The man who had sat in this same chair 4 years earlier, obsessed with documenting betrayal and pursuing justice, felt like a stranger to me now. That version of George Caldwell had been defined by what was done to him rather than what he chose to do next. This version was defined by different things. Students who succeeded because of patient instruction, friends who valued reliability over excitement, work that mattered more than work that paid well. A life built on choices rather than circumstances, on moving forward rather than looking back. I made myself a simple dinner, opened a bottle of wine I had been saving for no particular occasion, and spent the evening reading a book on advanced chess strategy. Small pleasures that felt enormous because they were freely chosen and quietly enjoyed. At midnight, as Christmas Eve became Christmas Day, I raised my glass to the empty room and spoke aloud the words I had been thinking for months. Thank you for showing me who I really am. Not to Brenda or Ryan, whose betrayal had inadvertently set me free. Not to the justice system that had held them accountable. Not to the friends and students who had helped me rebuild. To myself, for having the courage to start over. For choosing growth over bitterness. For building something better from the wreckage of something that had never been as good as I thought it was. For learning at 62 years old that the best revenge isn't getting even. It's getting free. If you liked this story, please like this video. Subscribe to the channel and share your impressions in the comments below. Stories of transformation and second chances remind us that it's never too late to rebuild our lives.